The PowerShell command window is available in two forms. The first is the console mode, which is what we've been using so far. The second is the ISE tool, the Integrated Scripting Environment tool. Console mode is useful and quick and simple for straightforward tasks. If you require the documentation for the commandlets and assistance with an editing tool, the integrated scripting environment may be a better choice. If your screen has low resolution and you don't have much space to have windows running, ISE's window decorations, icons, toolbars, help boxes may take up enough of the screen that you have very little left to actually show your files and enter your commands and get output. In that case, console mode is definitely better. Console mode is also very useful for remote PowerShell environments, particularly over low bandwidth connections, because you don't have to display all the graphics through the connection. Both tools have the same privilege restrictions with respect to administrator. Namely, it makes no difference what you log into Windows as. If you need the tool to have administrator privilege, you need to use Run As, whether it's console or ISE mode. Each tool has its own profile, the profile being the set of startup parameters, the startup commands that define the environment that it works in. This allows you to customize the two windows in different ways if you choose to do so. If you want them customized, but both in exactly the same way, you can create the one file and simply copy it for the other one. Most of the commands in PowerShell work the same in both tools. There are a few exceptions, specifically things where they decided that in the ISE environment, those commands don't make sense and or they don't think you should be using them because you should be using a different workflow. ISE, as of PowerShell Core 6, is no longer available. It has been deprecated or marked for elimination. Windows PowerShell will continue to have ISE, but there will not be any improvements to it, additions or modifications, only bug fixes, just like Windows PowerShell. PowerShell Core is console mode only at this time and is the future of PowerShell. It is also the only version that is cross-platform. Having said that, most of the scripting work that's out there right now is in Windows, not in the other environments, because PowerShell Core is so new. This course will focus on the Windows version, so ISE is available to you to use, particularly useful when you are new to scripting and need the documentation help. Both are started the same way, by putting in PowerShell and finding the entries on the menus. So when we go to start these tools, if you already have PowerShell or PowerShell ISE running, you'll have an icon in the taskbar. Alternately, even if one isn't running but you've previously pinned it to the taskbar, you'll have an icon for PowerShell. If you right-click on the icon, you'll see the choices for running as administrator. You'll also see the choice to simply run PowerShell ISE. We've already seen the console startup, so let's take a look at the ISE startup. And the two choices are ordinary user or administrator. When they start, they'll look identical except for the taskbar, title bar rather. So we'll go ahead and start the normal ISE window. It takes a little longer to start up than console, but not much. Which window panes are showing when it starts depends on which ones were showing the last time you quit it, or if you've changed the preferences. You can change what is available using the menu buttons across the top in the toolbar. You can choose to resize the different windows, etc., and whether or not to show the help window. The default is in the top half. You'll have an editing window. It's a notepad style section. And if you have multiple files open, you'll have multiple tabs across the top with the name of each file showing in the tab. If you have edited but not saved a file, there will be a decoration on the tab to show you that it is an unsaved file. The bottom half is a console type window, but it's not the true console. It's a version of it built into ISE. As I say, it will have some different commands available, specifically some limitations compared to console. You can simply enter your commands into the console area, and they will run essentially the same, except, as I say, ISE is designed to support getting access to documentation. So as you type in ISE mode, you'll get all kinds of pop-up help trying to suggest things to you. Some of those suggestions may be helpful, some may not. You can ignore them if you wish, but bear in mind, since they're pop-ups and since they have selections on them, quite often when you do something like pressing enter to run something, it won't actually run it. All it will do is select the thing that was already showing in the pop-up help section. Until you get used to it, this may be annoying. Simply press enter again to actually run the command and it will run. Note that since a good portion of the window has been given over to window decorations and extra window panes, like the editing window, the space for the console is actually rather limited. You can shrink various sections of it to reduce it, but of course if you've done that, you're really just trying to turn it into console and might be better off in console anyway. So if you have lots of screen real estate, it's an interesting tool, particularly for learning. Otherwise, console is more effective. The other way you can go ahead and start one of these tools is, of course, simply enter the command for them on the command line of either PowerShell console or ISE, or even in a command window, a traditional DOS-style command window. So if we go back to our PowerShell console window and type in the command ISE, it will go ahead and start an ISE window. When it does this, it does it in the background. So in our original window, we get our prompt back and can continue to do other commands, even though ISE is now running. If you expect to run ISE a lot, you may choose, once you have it running, to right-click the icon in the taskbar and pin it to the taskbar to make it easy to find back. I'm going to close off my ISE windows, which I don't need anymore. I'm also going to get rid of this one, which I see I've left running, which is a PowerShell Core 6 window, and I don't wish to be confused about which one I'm using. And I have two PowerShell console windows running, one in administrator mode and one as an ordinary user. I'm going to leave those running at this time. There are a few commands that are suggested that you try in both modes to kind of get an idea of what the output looks like from them. You should find that it's essentially the same from both for these commands. When you run the command get history, it's pulling back the history of commands you have been running in your PowerShell process. So those two lists will not be the same between the console window and the ISE window. As a matter of fact, it would not be the same between two separate PowerShell console windows or two separate PowerShell ISE windows. They each have their own history. The next video will move on to discuss commandlets.